Good morning. We'll make it official. Yeah, we were just chatting for the folks at home. Hi, folks at home. I'm gonna slide the camera back again. I forgot about that. Furniture gets moved around in here sometimes. Things get changed. Welcome those watching at home. Welcome to you all. We are finishing out our program here for these last few weeks of Easter before we hit Memorial Day in the summer. Talking about vocation. We got into this, last week, talking about Luther's and the Lutheran understanding of vocation, that it's more than just in Luther's day. The thought was that the only vocations, the only callings were if you went into the ministry of some type. So you were either a priest or you were in a convent or a monastery. And those were the holy vocations. Everybody else were just a bunch of schlubs, right? You're living in the material world, you're doing living in the devil's world. And so what would that matter that you had a job or that you were a parent or a spouse? And so Luther said, everything you do is a calling, everything is a holy calling. And he really rallied against those monks and of the Catholic teaching. And so I brought that up last week, like a lot of Lutheran teachings, it started as being against something, but I'm hoping we can lift that up as being just a core piece of who we are as Christians, is that we live out our faith in all of our daily callings. That's really, I think, the way that we're going to help rebuild the sense of what Christianity is in this country. Because so many people have just said, yeah, no thanks, it's not for me. Because they saw the church as this big religious organization, and that is something that you live out. Well, that's one part.
I was gonna say, I don't think it's all of it.
It's not.
Yeah.
But I think it's one way we can really flip the script. And if people see Christians as living out their faith as holy calling in everything they do, I think that's much more attractive than say, did you pay your membership dues? That kind of feel. Even if that's not how it was, I think that's how people started to just view it and perceive it. And then the other part we talked about, there's an article that was in the Lutheran magazine a few years ago, just getting us to explore, what are those callings? What are all the different roles? So we did that a little bit. That's what we're going to focus on today, is we're going to dig deeper into these different realms. The article calls it, here's the article, Tap into Your Vocation. The article calls it realms of responsibility. So we're going to get into that a little bit and have some brainstorming and maybe map out where each of your vocational networks are and see if there's any surprises or if it's like, yeah, this fits. Does everybody have something to write with, or do we need to go around and grab some stuff? See a bunch of crayons there, but you might want a pencil or a pen. There might be something to cover it up here. And Wilson then. It's just you, Johnny. Okay. Hopefully there's something up there.
Not the marker.
All right. You think so? At all. Yeah. Here we go. I got one.
Potentials. Yes.
I got one too.
Good call.
All right. So I'm gonna read to you parts of this article, and as we go, I'm gonna have you fill in these sheets. But it's nothing complicated. They divide this up into three categories. There's household, which encompasses your family life and your career, your job. Because at Luther's time, many worked from home, or your home was your job, right? Taking care of the household. Whatever you farmed or made, you made on the property. Then the second one is church, and the third one is society. So I'm going to get into these, and we're going to start writing some things down, and we'll include a file of this along with the online, with the video when it comes out, folks. All right, so we'll just jump in. It says, for Luther, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, to which we are joined in our baptisms, frees us from having to impress God with who we are or what we do. Can't get much more Lutheran than that, right? By faith in God's promise in Christ, we are free to serve our neighbor, not by escaping from this work to live among religious people. There's that, anti-monks and nuns, but by living our everyday lives. That is from Luther's Small Catechism Anniversary Study Edition, back in 2016. How do people shift their perspective and tap into their vocation? Luther's household chart found in his Small Catechism is a great starting point, says Timothy Winker, who's a professor of Lutheran history. Luther divided life into 3 arenas: household, church, society. Then the following breaks down these realms even further to guide reflection on your unique vocation. Pull out a pad of paper. Well, I provided that for you. Or if you'd rather use your smartphone, your notes, whatever, if you want to take it with you, go ahead. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read each section. Some of the examples in there are already going to name stuff you do. Just go ahead and write them. But we're going to brainstorm together, leave a little room, a little time to expand on it. So this is what we did last week, but more in depth. So first off, at home or work. Here we go. Child, sibling, parent. Guessing some of those apply. Doting grandparent, proud godparent, partner, spouse, roommate. Maybe you're married, but you also feel like a roommate some days. But that applies to maybe some of your kids or siblings or family who are in a roommate situation. Okay, friend, pet whisperer, tender of houseplants. Begin your exploration of vocation by considering the many hats you wear at home. Some are duty-driven, others are relational. One place to start is ask yourself, who or what do I care for? So yes, it's a giggle to think about your plants, but maybe you have a garden, maybe you have plants, pets. I know Roger and Lois have talked about their bird feeders they have at their window. We've done that too. It's so much fun. I know Johnny does too, to sit and watch the birds, squirrels come in. And then the other half is, who cares for you? Maybe that's part of your role too, is not just caregiver, but care receiver. That can be a vocation too, really. How do you treat the person who's caring for you? Maybe you've been sick. I know in this room, I know folks have had walking boots or injuries or illnesses, and folks have had to take care of you. That's a vocation too, is how you receive care. How do you treat your caregiver? Some days that's easier than others if you're feeling down. Go on. Luther notes in his household chart that even widowers have a role to fulfill. If you are mourning, you might also name that on the list. Especially think of Bible times when Jesus would show up at a house where somebody had died. That was a vocation, to show up and not just make a casserole for your neighbor, but publicly and privately mourn together. Additionally, if you actively host visitors, such as neighbors or exchange students, you can write down host or hosted. Some of you have had parents live with you. Take care of them. Or you've gone out to where they are. Your siblings take turns caring for them when they need it. Now reflect on your daily work. You may be actively studying, raising children, working for an organization or a company, taking a break from work, or retired. Yes, being retired is a vocation. We talked about that last week. Perhaps you're a consultant or other freelancer. Maybe you don't go into an office, but you're taking jobs remotely. Maybe you're in ministry. Maybe you're in the armed services, or used to be. Even as a veteran, that's a whole other web of vocational callings. Think of Diane Absher. How much, her husband was a veteran. And even since he's died, she spends how much time and energy every week at the VFW, at the American Legion, at the VA hospital. That's a whole nother realm. And maybe that inspires you to think of something else too. So as you're thinking of this part of your life, your work, describe your duties. I love this one. Consider the micro responsibilities associated with your calls. Okay, for example, a pastor may also write or speak extensively outside of her congregation. A retiree may live his vocation by pursuing travel, hobbies, time with family, volunteerism. So think of what you do as a volunteer. If you love traveling, how is that a vocation? How are you representing where you're from as you go? Are you a responsible traveler? When you're coming back to those micro responsibilities, are you a mentor? Are you a trainer? Are Roger mentioned that last week being a mentor. Are you part of a team at work? Are you middle management? Do you have to oversee some people and report to others? Whatever that is. All of those roles. And it says, when you can write no further, examine your list. And please feel free to make this your homework this week. Keep writing, right? I'm guessing you wrote some general things, some broad categories, but fill this out as minutely and extensively as possible. And then, when you can write no further, examine your list. Consider the sense of satisfaction you derive from performing each of those roles. Ask yourself, which vocations bring me the most joy? How about the most dread? For instance, right now, Kate was at a sleepover. Right, she got invited to a birthday party and a sleepover. I will be fully honest. That is one of the things, the vocations I dread is coordinating parties and play dates and getting the present, and the other parents have different styles, and even just saying like, well, what time will she be home? Oh, I guess, does that matter? Do you have someplace you go? Like, well, yeah, it does to me. Like, I want to know what's going on. Stuff like that. That is not a role I appreciate or look forward to, but it's still a role I have. It's still a vocation that I can live my faith out through. How I handle my frustration or my dread. Right? Are there roles I'm not actively embracing? Are there roles that are on your list that you realize I really do everything in my power to avoid this? Spend some time brainstorming fresh approaches you can bring to each call. The ones you don't like and the ones you love. Maybe you just in such a groove with it you don't even think about it. So spend some time brainstorming fresh approaches you can bring to each call. Not just like, I'm gonna mow my lawn horizontally instead of vertically this time. But like, how can I make this a conscious living out of my faith? Or maybe even if you're not thinking each time, how will this be living out my faith? Maybe you pray beforehand or afterwards about what you do. Maybe something as simple as that. For example, you may resolve to approach your friendships with more intention. Or maybe a shift in perspective will provide extra energy the next time you're summoned to parent or grandparent a child. People always say, oh, I love being a grandparent because I can do whatever I want and send them home, right? Okay, well, how is that a calling to live out your faith to be a grandparent? Watch the little ones or the older ones. That's realm number one. So that's household. That's probably a lot of your time, right? Your what you do at home, what you do at work-ish rotations. Anybody need a minute? Pen's moving. Start introducing the next one. Okay, next one. Church. In her role as spiritual gifts director for women of the ELCA, Valora Stock has observed that parishioners still tend to see vocation as relegated to rostered ministers. So that would be pastors, deacons, bishops, folks in the synod office, churchwide office, things like that. Luther would remind us that our call as members of a faith community is equally important, Wingert said. Answering this call can take a variety of shapes, including our presence at worship, our friendship toward others and our congregation, here again, if some of these are starting to sound, yep, this is something I do, go ahead and write it down in a second. So, presence at worship, friendship toward others in our congregation, our leadership in a committee, or our mentoring of young people. For this call, this realm of vocation, it's important to discern all of one's gifts and talents. An incorrect volunteer match can diminish a parishioner's joy or sense of purpose in his congregation, Starr said. Or think of it this way, how many times have you said or heard the phrase, oh, well, we can get the youth to do that. Okay, that's fine. We want the youth to get experience, serve the congregation, and learn what that is to be a part of something. But sometimes we also have to think of, well, what are the individual's gifts and how can they plug in? Same thing with retirees or new members. You know, they've got a great example here. For example, a banker joins a congregation and is expected to be the treasurer. Anybody who has just a whiff of accounting or something, oh, come do the audit, come do the treasurer, come be financial secretary, right? But maybe that person really wants to volunteer using gifts besides their ability to work with numbers, but they feel stuck and they feel responsible. Or for instance, somebody's a teacher. Oh, you should teach Sunday school. Maybe they need a break from teaching and being around kids. Maybe they have some other gifts, right? But we do that. A new member, sometimes we pounce so quickly before they get a chance to get a feel for the place and find their niche or their role. Maybe somebody joins the congregation because they moved here as a retired person to be closer to grandkids. Well, maybe they've got all sorts of gifts and energy, and we're just like, oh, they're retired. Oh, we'll take it easy. Like maybe they really don't. People make assumptions, right? So it's important, they say. I say he or she, who wrote this? Aaron Stravis. Okay, it's a she. So she says it's important to discern all of one's gifts and talents. This is where the ELCA's spiritual gifts assessment tool can come in handy.
Spiritual gifts assessment.
Yep. And I'll come back to that in a minute. It's also called a spiritual gifts inventory. Right? Have anybody done one of those before? Spiritual gifts inventory?
Get a different answer to
That's good. That's it. That's an excellent point. Where you're at any given moment might shift depending on your stage of life, your circumstances. Yeah. So it's good to do those periodically. Starr suggests that ELCA members use the tool to appraise all their spiritual gifts so they can find volunteer opportunities more closely matching their natural talents and abilities. So I'm going to hand this out. I printed it off. This is one that was actually written for the youth gathering at some point in the distant past. I've kept a PDF of it because since then, links have expired. They've put out new ones that aren't as good. I'll show you a new thing yet. I haven't tried it yet, but they have a whole new thing. But I still printed this out because it's a little dated on the now what page. Some of the things are like, work in your congregation's chat room. Okay. That's not a thing. Social media wasn't a thing when this one was out. That's how old it is. But it to me, it's the most straightforward. There's a reason why I've kept it. I'm hopeful for the new resource. We'll show you that. So we'll come back to that. This one is 75 questions. So we're not going to do it now. That'd be a lot of dead air for the folks at home. But I'll send it home with you, and it's a good place to start. Okay. Congregations need. Are you ready? Get another list. If any of these sound right, write them down. Congregations need musicians, teachers, preachers, committee members, readers, greeters, quilters, organizers, and others for creative, innovative ministries. And I know that didn't cover everything that goes out in the thing Valerie sends out with, where you want to volunteer in church. So think of all the different ways to volunteer at church. All the different, even just property team. Think of all the different things that you can do as taking care of the property. We were just talking about that before we started recording. Before you volunteer in church, or if you think about the roles you're already volunteering in, ask yourself, what does my congregation need? That's an important question. How am I involved? Where do I need to step back in order to realign my talents with my existing calls? Where do I need to step back to let somebody else step forward? Jot down some things from that, the middle column. But there's more, but wait, there's more. Beyond your congregation, consider living out your calling through your synod. If you aren't already receiving your synod's newsletter, sign up. What speaks to you? There may be synod-led initiatives you can support. Your vocation as an ELCA member also includes the work of the churchwide organization. From ELCA World Hunger, every time we've ever done the God's Global Barnyard collections, or the Lutheran World Relief Kits, or Lutheran Disaster Response, all of that is part of the churchwide level, or the worldwide the Lutheran World Federation. There's ELCA advocacy. If you're passionate about serving the hungry, you can get in touch with the advocacy groups who go to the legislature and make sure that there's policies that are helping the hungry. ELCA youth gathering. Well, boy, we're working on that a lot this year. And I have a feeling once we're there and Glenda and Teresa and I get our full exposure to it, we're going to come back fired up. And like the youth too. I've never been to one. Liz has been to 2 or 3. I know some of you and some of the other parents have been to them in the past. I'm terrified and excited, right? I'm an introvert, right? There's 30,000 people coming up, but it's good. I'm really excited to be there, not only for myself, but to watch these 8 teenagers experience it, watch them through their eyes. And I have no idea the conversations this is going to inspire, but I guarantee we're going to come back with stuff to talk about, stories to tell. But there's a place for you to match your talents and existing ministries. It's not limited to just Messiah Lutheran Church and Mechanicsville. There's other organizations in the community level, synod level, and the church-wide level. Consider your spiritual gifts and passions and the ways they might match the needs of the ELCA at those 3 expressions. That's what they've called it, as expressions: congregation, synod, and church. So you can ask, do I feel tugged toward leadership? That doesn't just mean ministries. It could mean serving on a board or a committee at the synod level, on the synod council, being involved in any of these ministries. Do I feel a need to step back from congregational work that isn't fulfilling and make room for new opportunities? Maybe where your gifts are, maybe that role isn't right here, right now, but maybe there's another place where you can find a way to use it, to follow that call. So you can write some of that stuff down too. And remember, you don't have to do it all. That's another common thing. People in churches, they love like signing up and volunteering and helping. And that's another reason why we don't like jump on new members, like sign up for all the things. Like, we don't want people to burn out. So we're part of a faith community doing God's work. What's the slogan? God's work on hands. So we're doing all of that together. If you don't mind, I want to take a little field trip over here to the computer screen. I have some show and tell, but I want to do a screen share to show the folks at home. So come on over. I'm going to turn this so everybody can see it. Folks at home, they're looking at a chalkboard for a moment, but I'm going to set up a screen share so that you can see these other bits. Okay, so first, the first thing you'll see on the screen, this is the article we've been reading. And you should have gotten a link to this. Here it is. You should have gotten a link to this. Oh no. Should have gotten a link to that with the first class video. Okay. The next tab is the Virginia Synod. So if you haven't been to the Virginia Synod website before, it is full of good information, and if you just want to go to ministries right here, adult faith formation, disaster response, Global Companion Synod. We have a relationship with the Lutheran Church in Papua New Guinea. If you're interested in that, they're sending a group over. They may have already recruited, but maybe you want to become a pen pal online or get to know how the Lutheran Church works over there and get involved in that. Lay ministry. You want to be a preacher? Do you want to be an authorized minister who can come in and do communion in a place that might not have a pastor every Sunday? Mission partners. So I'm going to click on that one. We've got Virginia Synod Ministry Partners, Caroline Furnace Camp and Retreat Center, and Circle. Well, we do stuff with that. Grace Inside, that's a prison ministry. There's a federal prison down in Petersburg, and Pastor Paul Christian, who's at the Lutheran Church in Petersburg, worked with them for years. He recently had to retire because of some health stuff. But maybe that's something that you're feeling called to. Hungry Mother Lutheran Retreat Center. Did you know there's another camp in the Synod? Way out west in the Hungry Mother, what is it, State Park, State Forest? There's another camp out there, smaller one, but they do some cool stuff. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, which just changed their name. I don't remember their name, but they just changed their name. Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary down in South Carolina. They just announced that they're going to move to Lenore Ryan College or Lenore Ryan University in Hickory and kind of combine resources because it's a tough world for seminaries and higher ed. National Lutheran Communities and Services. There's some amazing Lutheran homes in the state that work with seniors and find ways to connect them with other congregations and other things. There's one called Brandon Oaks out in Roanoke that does some amazing stuff. For instance, Roanoke College, Virginia Interfaith Center, that is the advocacy group in the state of Virginia, works with other Christians and other religions with the state legislature to try to advocate for policies that protect the poor, the hungry, things like that. Virginia Lutheran Homes, that's the one Brandon Oaks is a part of. This is a little different. Okay, back up to ministries. There's new ministry starts. There's, I think, 4 of them in the Synod right now. Some of them are doing some really interesting specialized ministries. Maybe you feel called to support them with your time, with your energy, with your donations. Power in the Spirit. That's every summer and now online every winter. That's where you can go and get built up in your faith and explore that. Renew 145. I confess, I don't even know that one. Tapestry does justice work with different marginalized communities and does teaching and workshops on that. Truth and Love. I know that one pretty well. That's what Liz is. That's the ministry she's in charge of, doing mediation. If you want to get training in that, we could sign up as a congregation or a council, or you could attend a workshop on how to help congregations going through times of conflict. Youth ministry. Anybody know Pastor Dave Delaney?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's still going. He does so many different events through the year. You don't have to have youth to go and be a mentor there, to be one of the table conversation groups. And folks have talked about how they're still in touch with the kids that they sat at a table with for that weekend because you form such close connections. And of course, World Hunger. Then there's the ELCA's homepage. Well, right on the top, resources for the crisis in the Holy Land. But you look at these tabs, about the ELCA, okay, our mission, our history, congregation synods, related organizations, okay, faith, how to build your faith. There's different teaching bits, there's daily Bible readings, there's all the social statements and social messages. Find a congregation, of course, got to have that. Resources, if you want to print things, if you want to download stuff. News, headlines here, 50 years of ordained women, sanctuary denomination. But then look at our work. If you're looking for a place to volunteer, look at this list. Okay, and I'm not even going to try to read it. But the headings are congregation and synod level, leadership, global mission, other related ministries, relief and development, publicly engaged church. But yeah, that's, if you're looking for a way to live out your calling or you're open to exploring, this is a great place to check. And then they don't have the link anymore to the spiritual gifts inventory, but they started this bigger system. And I read about a little bit, but I confess I don't know enough about it. So that's my homework this week. It's called Journey with an I. And you have to make an account, but it is get the tools you need to focus your faith, your actions, and your relationship with the Lutheran Church. And so it's this whole thing where you identify your interests, let us get to know you, take the spiritual personality quiz, so they updated the terminology a little, learn about yourself, discover unique paths, and then find what's next. So then so none of this is just like, oh, it's like taking one of those quizzes on BuzzFeed, like which Harry Potter house would I be in? This is to genuinely find out about yourself and then apply it. So, where can you use this? Where can you live it out? It's not just ending with us, it's where you live. So I wanted to show you all those. So you can have to see it again. But for those at home, I wanted to make sure you got to see these too. And it's journey.faith. That's the How It Works page. Yep. And then elca.org. and vasynod.org. Turn the camera back. There's everybody again. All right. This is information overload day. I should have given you a heads up. All right, number 3, row number 3, right-hand column. Around the block, country, and world. Finally, consider your vocation as it relates to society. Luther knew the church wasn't the center of the universe, despite what a lot of other folks in his day and age thought. He knew that was a part of things. He taught about the 2 kingdoms that God works through. Excuse me, nowadays we might talk about it like 2 realms or 2 strategies, as I had a professor call it, that God's working through the left-hand kingdom or strategy, through the institutions of the world, through governments, through police departments, through society, even institution. The church is an institution in the left-hand kingdom, our systems, our governments. But then there's also the right-hand strategy, the right-hand kingdom of the gospel, of the law working on our hearts, leading us to repentance, leading us to live out our faith and our vocations. So both work together, but the idea is that God is in charge of all of it. It's not just the holy is over here with the holy people in holy places, but God is working in and through all of creation, including even governments and institutions and things like that. So Luther was more interested in how God calls us outside the church walls. He's the author, this book that we mentioned last week is called Listen, God is Calling, Luther and Vocation. That's what I'm gonna highlight some of that book next week. That author said the absolute core of Luther's ethics is the notion of neighbor love. Well, where are your neighbors? They're not just here, they're out in the world. So vocation, here, get ready to write again. Vocation urges us to love and serve our neighbors. Calls or vocations in society include a neighbor to people living on your block or in your community. Not everybody lives on the block, right? Or a neighborhood. A greeter to those visiting or seeking refuge in your city or your town. One of the things I'm going to talk about with our New Orleans group later today is, where do you live? Is it rural? Is it suburban? Or is it city? And I'm guessing out of the 11 of us, probably 9 of us are going to say suburban or rural. And only 1 or 2 would either consider that where they live now or have lived in the past would be considered urban. And we're going to New Orleans, right? It's not the biggest city in the country, but when you think of urban areas and neighborhoods, if you've ever watched documentaries or TV shows set in New Orleans, it feels much more city than a lot of places around here. Okay. So that what the theme of our conversation today with the New Orleans group is one of the daily themes is that we're created to be brave. And we're gonna have to be brave, step outside our comfort zones while we're at the Okay, next one. You're a citizen. You vote, you pay taxes, you obey laws or not. You speak out against injustice through the different channels. So your neighbor, you're a greeter, you're an ambassador, a representative of where you live. You're a citizen. Next one, you're a volunteer through civic organizations. You assist your school. How many of you now or in the past were on a PTA or some school committee or helped with a fundraiser, right? Have you ever been a part of Kiwanis, Lions, Moose, Elks, Masons, whatever? I mean, those aren't religious, but they're still a calling because they actively serve their communities as well. You could be an activist. Anybody ever gone to a protest? I have not. You could protest poverty, racism, other kinds of injustice, even far. You could just be more than just a citizen, somebody who dwells on this planet, right? You might go do a litter pickup. Our congregation in California, the men's group, did litter pickup once a month. We had to have special training and vests and hard hats because people drive crazy on the 101, right? We found a tire buried in the dirt. We could not get that thing out. But that picking up litter, doing a river cleanup, You know, whatever that might be, you're an earth dweller. I'm tasked with caring for a planet that's got some issues. Write down each of these calls and take time to consider each one. How are you living out your vocation as a neighbor? Where can you grow or improve? More and more, I think more today than a lot of other points in our history, we're much more, each house is its own little house, right? This is our own little world, our own little bubble. My mom would tell stories about growing up in Milwaukee, and I've been to that street. It's very much city. It's not suburbs. And her grandmother lived with them. Very unusual circumstance in the 50s. My mom's parents were divorced. Apparently the guy had a whole other family. So my grandmother raised my mom and her brother on her own for a number of years. And her mom came and lived with them to help. Everybody called her little grandma because she was like 4'10". She would sit on the porch. She knew everybody in the neighborhood. She knew their birthdays, maybe a little bit up in their business, but I never got to meet her. But all the stories I've heard was she knew her neighborhood. I don't think that's very common anymore. Because I'm gonna give away something I want to use in a couple weeks, but have you ever seen the movie The Hurt Locker?
No, nice.
Okay, very good movie, intense. It's about a guy who's in Iraq in the early years of the war on terror. And his job is to go and defuse IEDs, improvised explosive devices. That's terrifying. But he thrives at it because he knows what he's supposed to do. He knows the rules. A lot of folks come home from the military, you hear the stories, not just PTSD, but just how do you come back to normal? And there's a scene towards the end of the movie where the guy came back from multiple tours defusing IEDs. And he's in the grocery store with his wife. She says, I'm going to head towards the checkouts. Why don't you grab some cereal? Okay. There's a scene where he's standing in the cereal aisle. Have you been in the cereal aisle lately?
Good luck.
It's so many flavors and varieties, and he's just standing and going. And he almost panics. And spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, he signs back up again. Despite what his family wants, despite all common sense to maybe don't roll the dice again, because it made more sense to him. More and more in our society, things have become individualized. Algorithms that make suggestions for you. iTunes came out with, Genius a while back. Well, we'll just tell you some songs based on what you listen to, what you think you like. Spotify and Pandora do that. Streaming services do that. They make suggestions. Even your grocery store things, if you have an online thing, they'll say you might want to buy these, right? And there's every kind of cereal, every kind of beer, every kind of soda that has a flavor. So everything has become more catered, individualized, narrowed down. And that turns us in on ourselves. It is what it is. I don't think we're going to change it. But that's another vocation too. How do you handle being a consumer?
Be aware that you're being manipulated.
Yeah.
And we are all being manipulated.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, okay, so what does that all mean? What does that vocation mean, to be a consumer? And to be in a community when community seems more and more a fading thing. Yeah, it takes effort, right? So how are we doing for time? We're doing all right. So that's where I'm gonna stop. The next section. Next week, we're gonna go through that book just to kind of round out this whole conversation on vocation. And then the week after that, the last section of this article says, listen to God. So not next week, but the week after, we're gonna practice listening to God. We're gonna do something called centering prayer, which is very countercultural nowadays. And which is not gonna be too fun for the people at home. It's a quiet thing. But we're fun for you to try, not to watch. That's what I'm going to say. And we're going to get into some Bonhoeffer 2 weeks from now too. He has a book called Ethics that kind of gets on vocation one chapter. But for the rest of the day today, so we're going to pause the article we've been following. If you downloaded it or watched it all, we're going to save listen to God for 2 weeks from now. And 2 things I want to do to finish up today. First of all, for real, take these home if you've been following along, take a few minutes after the video and flesh this out. Get, like it said before, micro responsibilities, really write this down. And then I just want you to look at this visually, and I think I can already see it on your sheets now. The first column is probably the biggest, right? It's gonna have the most items on the list. That's what you spend most of your time actually doing, right? The tasks and the vocations just every day. The second one is church. You're sitting here in a Bible study, so clearly you're involved in the congregation, or you took some time to watch this video. So that one might be smaller than the first one, but still decent size. What are your roles within this congregation, within this branch of the Christian family? And then the third one, that one I think is the most abstract, right? Because it's roles that you have, but you're probably not living out a role as a citizen or a consumer consciously every day. You just gotta go to the grocery store and get what you need, right? Heart broke, you gotta go buy a new light bulb, right? You go vote on election day, but are you thinking about it the rest of the year apart from like, these ads, right? So flesh those two out too, but I kind of want you to have a visual to kind of have a map of your vocations. Just an idea of, okay, what percentage of my time do I spend in terms of the list? But then as you go through each one and do what we said to do on the first list, where do you find joy? Which ones do you dread, right? Do that for all of them. And also not have a map of just what quantity, what time commitment, but also reflect on the quality. Maybe some of these vocations you don't spend a lot of time doing, but maybe they do bring you joy or dread, or maybe they have a bigger impact as a neighbor, as a citizen, as a consumer, as a member of a church council, whatever. So really take some time reflecting on that. We'll touch on what you learn as you reflect at the beginning of next week. Write myself a note. And then the second thing is I'm going to pass out these spiritual gifts inventories, and I'll make sure the PDFs come your way. The first part, these are in sets, okay? The copy machine very nicely puts these so they're like every other, right? That should be all of them. But it just says, what gifts do you have? And remember, this was written for a youth gathering probably 15-20 years ago, okay? So maybe some of the terminology or verbiage is a little dated, but it's really simple, okay? For each one of these, you have 5 options on the end. You've taken surveys like this before. You say, this is very true of me, frequently true of me, sometimes true of me, infrequently true of me, rarely true of me. When presented a goal, I quickly think of what to do to achieve the desired result. That's number 1. Number 13, I love to dance and enjoy encouraging others through movement, right? And some of them might sound silly, but these all relate to some kind of gifts people.
When I dance before groups, I feel the real sense of God's presence. Nobody else does, I can promise you.
Or maybe they're looking at you like, wow, he must be filled with the Spirit.
Yeah.
So,
Spirits.
and the last page of this set, these are 2-sided. Last page of this set is, well, the second to last page, both front and back last page, is the scoring grid. So they, of course, break these out, mix them up. You fill in your totals here, right? Questions 1, 26, and 51, you'd add up your 3 numbers. If you had 3 5s there, you'd be way past, you'd be up to 15. Just follow the instructions, okay? And then on the back, gift clusters. In the large circles, write one of the spiritual gifts that had a total of 7 or more, and then keep filling in the circles kind of down the line. Again, I love having visual stuff, not just. And then part 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one says, now what? Okay. With which gifts have you been truly blessed? So you use those circles there on the back of the inventory. With which gifts have you been truly blessed? Discovering the answer to that question requires the following: prayer, study, self-examination, track the Spirit's work. So that means if you're like, okay, I'm gonna sign up and do this, or I'm gonna get involved with this, or I'm gonna give more attention to this. Pay attention. What happens? Are you feeling more joy? Remember, joy detectives, right? Is God telling you something through that? Or not? Maybe this isn't the right calling. And then listen for affirmation. Friends and families might notice a difference. They might be like, wow, ever since you started XYZ, it's just like, I see this like whole change come over you, or I just see a difference. Pay attention to that too. And then it says putting your gifts to use. And the next couple pages have kind of categories of the different spiritual gifts. I believe they match the ones on the back. And it gives some examples under each one. This is especially where you see how old this is. But administration, discernment, evangelism, encouragement, faith, giving, hospitality, intercession, knowledge, intercession, praying for people. People might be like, well, of course you pray, whatever, but maybe you're just really good at it. Maybe you remember the details of the conversations with people in your life and you can, fold those into your prayers. Knowledge, leadership, mercy, pastoring, service, teaching, wisdom, and there's also relational gifts. Advocacy, artistry, dance, drama, intergenerational openness. Maybe you love bringing together little kids and seniors, I don't know. Listening, music, skilled craft, technological skill, writing, and then the last page says beyond church, right? A lot of times we think, oh, you fill out one of these surveys for what to do at church, as we've just said, there's so much more than that. So this is a place to brainstorm. So what you filled out today is part 1, and that's your own self-inventory of the things you're already doing. Be reflecting on that. Spiritual gifts comes at it from the other side. It tries to identify the gifts that you have right now, and then helps you think, where can I use it? Hopefully between these two, you're coming at it from both directions. You come up with some insights. So please take some time this week and go over these. And I'm really looking forward to next week finding out what you learned. And folks at home, same thing. Take some time, do these, and send in what you find out. We'll include your insights in our conversation too. Last roundup here, last call for questions, comments, thoughts.
Responsibility, is that all stuff we're presently involved in?
I would say that you're presently involved in, or maybe as you go through the list, you think, well, maybe I am doing this, I didn't realize it, or it could also be, maybe there's that little Holy Spirit going, hey, look at this. Something that potentially could be. But start with what you're currently doing. You said you've done a spiritual gifts inventory before, Susie? Bill, did you too?
Maybe in Sunday school.
Sunday school, yeah.
Okay.
Over my 76 years, I've done a lot of different things. And then they changed it, so it's like what I'm doing now, what I did 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Or same thing with a different name.
Yeah.
No. Well, then this is exciting. I look forward to seeing how you experience this and how you find it. All right, let's close with a prayer. Gracious God, thank you for calling us. Thank you for calling us to be your people. Thank you for calling us in your grace. Thank you for all of the callings in our lives, the vocations, each one an opportunity to live as your children, to share your good news in word and deed, to find ways to care for people and creation, and to honor you and give you glory. Help us to be mindful of it. Help us to be aware and open to your calls. Give us ears to hear and eyes to see, hearts to love. Help us be your hands in this world. Pray for the folks around this table, folks who will watch this video later, that they would be open to your Holy Spirit as they reflect, as they inventory, that they would listen for where they feel dread, where they feel joy, and where they feel need. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.